The Red Badge of Courage. We're going to continue from chapter 12, where I left off. At times he thought he could see heaving masses of men. He hurried on in the dusk. The day had faded until he could barely distinguish place for his feet. The purple darkness was filled with men who lectured and jabbered. Sometimes he could see them gesticulating against the blue and somber sky. There seemed to be a great ruck of men and munitions spread about in the forest and in the fields. The little narrow roadway now lay lifeless. There was overturned wagons like sun-dried boulders. The bed of the former torrent was choked with the bodies of horses and splintered parts of war machines. It had come to pass that his wound pained him but little. He was afraid to move rapidly, however, for a dread of disturbing it. He held his head very still and took many precautions against stumbling. He was filled with anxiety, and his face was pinched and drawn in anticipation of the pain of any sudden mistake of his feet in the gloom. His thoughts, as he walked, fixed intently upon his hurt. There was a cool, liquid feeling about it, and he imagined blood moving slowly down under his hair. His head seemed swollen to a size that made him think his neck to be inadequate. The new silence of his wound made much worriment. The little blistering voices of pain that had called out from his scalp were, he thought, definite in their expression of danger. By them he believed that he could measure his plight, but when they remained ominously silent, he became frightened and imagined terrible fingers that clutched into his brain. Amid it, he began to reflect upon various incidents and conditions of the past. He bethought him of certain meals his mother had cooked at home, in which those dishes of which he was particularly fond had occupied prominent positions. He saw the spread table. The pine walls of the kitchen were glowing in the warm light from the stove. Too, he remembered how he and his companions used to go from the schoolhouse to the bank of a shaded pool. He saw his clothes in disorderly array upon the grass of the bank. He felt the swash of the fragrant water upon his body. The leaves of the overhanging maple rustled with melody in the wind of youthful summer. He was overcome presently by a dragging weariness. His head hung forward, and his shoulders were stooped as if he were bearing a great bundle. His feet shuffled along the ground. He held continuous arguments as to whether he should lie down and sleep at some near spot, or force himself some near pot, I almost said. I don't smoke pot, but anyway, or force himself on until he reached a certain haven. He often tried to dismiss the question, but his body persisted in rebellion, and his senses nagged at him like pampered babies. At last he heard a cheery voice near his shoulder. "Yea, seem it to be pretty bad way, boy. It seemed to be in a pretty bad way, boy." The youth did not look up, but he assented with thick tongue. The owner of the cheery voice took him firmly by the arm. "Well," he said with a round laugh, "I'm going your way. The whole gang is going your way, and I guess I can give you a lift." They began to walk like a drunken man and his friend. As they went along, the man questioned the youth and assisted him with the replies, like one manipulating the mind of a child. Sometimes he interjected anecdotes. "What regiment do you belong to, eh? What's that? The 304th, New York? Why, what corps is that? What corps is that? Oh, it is. Why, I thought they wasn't engaged today. They're way over in the center. Oh, they was, eh? Well, pretty nearly everybody got their share of fightin' today. By dad, I'd give myself up for dead any number of times. There was shootin' here and shootin' there and hollerin' here and hollerin' there in the damn darkness until I couldn't tell to save my soul which side I was on. Sometimes I thought it was sure enough from the other side, And other times I could have swore I was from the bitter end of Florida. It was the most mixed up darn thing I ever seen. And these here whole woods is a regular mess. It'll be a miracle if we find our regiments tonight. Pretty soon enough, we'll meet a plenty of guards and provost guards and one thing or another. Ho, there they go with an officer, I guess. Look at his leg a dragging. He's got the war he wants, I bet. He won't be talking so big about his reputation on all that when they go to sawing off his leg, poor feller. My brother's got whiskers just like that. How'd you get way over here anyhow? Your regiment is a long way from here, ain't it? Well, I guess we can find it. Yeah, you know, there was a boy killed in my company today, and I thought the world and all of. Jack was a nice feller, by ginger. It hurt like thunder to see old Jack just get knocked flat. We was a standing pretty peaceable for a spell, though there were men running every way around us, and, well, while we was standing there like that, some come a big fat feller. He began pecking at Jack's elbow, and he says, "Say, where's the road and the river?" And Jack, he never paid no attention, and the feller kept on pecking at his elbow and saying, "Say, where's the road and the river?" Jack was a looking ahead and in the time trying to see the Johnnies coming through the woods, and he never paid no attention to the big fat feller for a long time. But at last he turned around and he says, "Oh, go to hell and find the road and the river." And just then a shot slapped him bang on the side of the head. He was a sergeant too. Them was his last words. Thunder! I wish we was sure of finding our regiments tonight. It gonna be a long hunting, but I guess we can do it. In the search which followed, the man of the cheery voice seemed to the youth to possess a wand of a magic kind. He threaded the mazes of the tangled forest with a strange fortune. In encounter with guards and patrols, he displayed the keenness of a detective and the valor of a gamin. Obstacles fell before him and became of assistance. The youth, with his chin still on his breast, stood woodenly by while his companion beat ways and means out of sullen things. The forest seemed a vast hive of men buzzing about in frantic circles, but the cheery man conducted the youth without mistakes, until at last he began to chuckle with glee and self-satisfaction. "Ah, there ye are. See that fire?" The youth nodded stupidly. "Well, there's where your regiment is. Ah, now, goodbye, old boy. Good luck to ye." A warm and strong hand clasped the youth's languid fingers for an instant, and then he heard a cheerful and audacious whistling as the man strode away. As he who had so befriended him was thus passing out of his life, it suddenly occurred to the youth that he had not once seen his face. Chapter 13. The youth went slowly toward the fire indicated by his departed friend. As he reeled, he bethought him of the welcome his comrades would give him. He had a conviction that he would soon feel in his sore heart the barbed missiles of ridicule. He had no strength to invent a tale. He would be a soft target. He made vague plans to go off into the deeper darkness and hide, but they were all destroyed by the voices of exhaustion and pain from his body. His ailments, clamoring, forced him to seek the place of food and rest at whatever cost. He swung unsteadily toward the fire. He could see the forms of men throwing black shadows in the red light, and as he went nearer, it became known to him in some way that the ground was strewn with sleeping men. Of a sudden, he confronted a black and monstrous figure. A rifle barrel caught some glinting beams. "Halt! Halt!" He was dismayed for a moment, but he presently thought that he recognized the nervous voice. As he stood tottering before the rifle barrel, he called out, "Why, hello, Wilson. You here?" The rifle was lowered to a position of caution, and the loud soldier came slowly forward. He peered into the youth's face. "That you, Henry?" "Yes, it is. It's me." Well, well, old boy, said the other. By ginger, I'm glad to see you. I give you up for a goner. I thought you was dead for sure enough. There was husky emotion in his voice. The youth found that now he could barely stand upon his feet. There was a sudden sinking of his forces. He thought he must hasten to produce his tale to protect him from the missiles already at the lips of his redoubtable comrades. So staggering before the loud soldier, he began, Yes, I've had an awful time. I've been all over, way over, over on the right. Terrible fighting over there. I had an awful time. I got separated from the regiment over on the right. I got shot in the head. I never seen such fighting. Awful time. I don't see how I could have got separated from the regiment. I got shot too. His friend had stepped forward quickly. What? Got shot? Why didn't you say so first, poor old boy? We must hold on a minute. What am I doing? I'll call Simpson. Another figure at that moment loomed in the gloom. They could see that it was the corporal. Who you talking to, Wilson? He demanded. His voice was anger-toned. Who you talking to? You the darndest sentinel. Why, hello, Henry. You here? Why, I thought you was dead 4 hours ago. Great Jerusalem, they keep turning up every 10 minutes or so. We thought we'd lost 42 men by straight count, but if they keep a-coming on this way, we'll get the company all back by morning. Yet, where was you? Over on the right. I got separated, began the youth with considerable glibness. But his friend had interrupted hastily. Yes, and he got shot in the head, and he's in a fix, and we must see him right away. He rested his rifle in the hollow of his left arm and his right around the youth's shoulder. Gee, it must hurt like thunder, he said. The youth leaned heavily upon his friend. Yes, it hurts a good deal, he replied. There was faltering in his voice. Oh, said the corporal. He linked his arm in the youth's and drew him forward. Come on, Henry, I'll take care of you. As they went on together, the loud private called out after them, Put him to sleep in my blanket, Simpson, and hold on a minute. Here's my canteen. It's full of coffee. Look at his head by the fire and see how it looks. Maybe it's a pretty bad one. When I get relieved in a couple of minutes, I'll be over to and see to him. The youth's senses were so deadened that his friend's voice sounded from afar, and he could scarcely feel the pressure of the corporal's arm. He submitted passively to the latter's directing strength. His head was in the old manner hanging forward upon his breast. His knees wobbled. The corporal led him into the glare of the fire. Now, Henry, he said, let's have a look at your old head. The youth sat down obediently, and the corporal, laying aside his rifle, began to fumble in the bushy hair of his comrade. He was obliged to turn the other's head so that the full flush of the firelight would beam upon it. He puckered his mouth with the critical air. He drew back his lips and whistled through his teeth when his fingers came in contact with the splashed blood and the rare wound. Ah, here we are, he said. He awkwardly made further investigations. Just as I thought, he added presently. You've been grazed by a ball. It's raised a queer lump just as if some feller had lammed you on the head with a club. It stopped the bleeding long time ago. The most about it is that in the morning you'll feel like a number 10 hat wouldn't fit you. And your head, it'll be up, all here up and feel as dry as burnt pork. And you may get a lot of other sicknesses too by morning. You can never tell. Still, I don't much think so. It's just a damn good belt on the head and nothing more. Now you just sit here and don't move while I go route out the relief. Then I'll send Wilson to take care of you. The corporal went away. The youth remained on the ground like a parcel. He stared with a vacant look into the fire. After a time, he aroused for some part, and the things about him began to take form. He saw that the ground in the very deep shadows was cluttered with men sprawling in every conceivable posture. Glancing narrowly into the more distant darkness, he caught occasional glimpses of visages that loomed pallid and ghostly, lit with a phosphorescent glow. These faces expressed in their lines the deep stupor of the tired soldiers. They made them appear like drunk men with wine. This bit of forest might have appeared to an ethereal wanderer as the scene of the result of some frightful debauch. On the other side of the fire, the youth observed an officer asleep, seated bolt upright, with his back against a tree. There was something perilous in his position. Badgered by dreams, perhaps, he swayed with little bounces and starts, like an old toddy stricken grandfather in a chimney corner. Dust and stains were upon his face. His lower jaw hung down as if lacking strength to assume its normal position. He was the picture of an exhausted soldier after a feast of war. He had evidently gone to sleep with his sword in his arms. These two had slumbered in an embrace, but the weapon had been allowed in time to fall unheeded to the ground. The brass-mounted hilt lay in contact with some parts of the fire. Within the gleam of rose and orange light from the burning sticks were other soldiers, snoring and heaving or lying death-like in slumber. A few pairs of legs were struck forth rigid and straight. The shoes displayed the mud or dust of marches, and bits of rounded trousers, protruding from the blankets, showed rents and tears from hurried pitchings through the dense brambles. The fire crackled musically. From it swelled light smoke. Overhead, the foliage moved softly. The leaves, with their faces turned toward the blaze, were colored shifting hues of silver, often edged with red. Far off to the right, through a window in the forest, could be seen a handful of stars lying like glittering pebbles on the black level of the night. Occasionally, in this low-arched hall, a soldier would arouse and turn his body to a new position, the experience of his sleep having taught him of uneven and objectionable places upon the ground under him. Or perhaps he would lift himself to a sitting posture, blink at the fire for an unintelligent moment, throw a swift glance at his prostrate companion, and then cuddle down again with a grunt of sleepy content. The youth sat in a forlorn heap until his friend, the loud young soldier, came, swinging 2 canteens by their light strings. "Well now, Henry, old boy," said the latter, "we'll have you fixed up in just about a minute." He had the bustling ways of an amateur nurse. He fussed around the fire and stirred the sticks to brilliant exertions. He made his patient drink largely from the canteen that contained the coffee. It was to the youth a delicious draught. He tilted his head far back and held the canteen long to his lips. The cool mixture went caressingly down his blistered throat. Having finished, he sighed with comfortable delight. The loud young soldier watched his comrade with an air of satisfaction. He later produced an extensive handkerchief from his pocket. He folded it into the manner of bandage and soused water from the other canteen upon the middle of it. This crude arrangement he bound over the youth's head, tying the ends in a queer knot at the back of the neck. "There," he said, moving off and surveying his deed. "Yeah, you look like the devil, but I bet you feel better." The youth contemplated his friend with grateful eyes. Upon his aching and swelling head, the cold cloth was like a tender woman's hand. "You don't holler ner say nothin'," remarked his friend approvingly. "I know I'm a blacksmith at takin' keer sick folks, and you never squeaked. You're a good un, Henry. Most of men would been in the hospital long ago. A shot in the head ain't foolin' business." The youth made no reply, but began to fumble with the buttons of his jacket. "Well, come now," continued his friend. "Come now, I must put you to bed and see that you get a good night's rest." The other got carefully erect, and the loud young soldier led him among the sleeping forms lying in groups and rows. Presently he stooped and picked up his blankets. He spread the rubber one upon the ground and placed the woolen one, right, wooden blanket, the woolen one about the youth's shoulders. "There now," he said, "lie down and get some sleep." The youth, with his manner of dog-like obedience, got carefully down like a crone stooping. He stretched out with a murmur of relief and comfort. The ground felt like the softest couch, but of a sudden he ejaculated, "Hold on a minute. Where are you going to sleep?" His friend waved his hand impatiently. Right down there by ye. Well, but hold on a minute, continued the youth. What you going to sleep in? I got your, the loud young soldier snarled. Shut up and go to sleep. Don't be making a damn fool of yourself, he said severely. After the reproof, the youth said no more. An exquisite drowsiness had spread through him. The warm comfort of the blanket enveloped him and made a gentle languor. His head fell forward on his crooked arm, and his weighted lids went slowly down over his eyes. Hearing a splatter of musketry from the distance, he wondered indifferently if those men sometimes slept. He gave a long sigh, snuggled down into his blanket, and in a moment was like his comrades. Chapter 14. When the youth awoke, it seemed to him that he had been asleep for 1,000 years, and he felt sure that he opened his eyes upon an unexpected world. Gray mists were slowly shifting before the first efforts of the sun rays. An impending splendor could be seen in the eastern sky. An icy dew had chilled his face, and immediately upon arousing he curled farther down into his blankets. He stared for a while at the leaves overhead, moving in a heraldic wind of the day. The distance was splintering and blaring with the noise of fighting. There was in the sound an expression of a deadly persistency, as if it had not begun and was not to cease. About him were the rows and groups of men that he had dimly seen the previous night. They were getting a last draught of sleep before the awakening. The gaunt, careworn features and dusty figures were made plain by this quaint light of the dawning. But it dressed the skin of the men in corpse-like hues and made the tangled limbs appear pulseless and dead. The youth started up with a little cry when his eyes first swept over the motionless mass of men, thick spread about the ground, pallid and in strange postures. His disordered mind interpreted the hall of the forest as a charnel place. He believed for an instant that he was in the house of the dead, and he did not dare to move lest these corpses started up, squalling and squeaking. In a second, however, he achieved his proper mind. He swore a complicated oath at himself. He saw that this somber posture was not a fact of the present, but a mere prophecy. He heard then the noise of a fire crackling briskly in the cold air, and, turning his head, he saw his friend pottering busily about a small blaze. A few other figures moved in the fog, and he heard the hard crackling of axe blows. Suddenly, there was a hollow rumble of drums. A distant bugle sang faintly. Similar sounds, varying in strength, came from near and far over the forest. The bugles called to each other like brazen gamecocks. The near thunder of the regimental drums rolled. The body of men in the woods rustled. There was a general uplifting of heads. A murmuring of voices broke upon the air. In it there was much bass of grumbling oaths. Strange gods were addressed in condemnation of the early hours necessary to correct war. An officer's peremptory tenor rang out and quickened the stiffened movement of the men. The tangled limbs unraveled. The corpse-hued faces were hidden behind fists that twisted slowly in the eye sockets. The youth sat up and gave vent to an erroneous yawn. "Thunder!" he remarked petulantly. He rubbed his eyes, and then, putting up his hand, felt carefully of the bandage over his wound. His friend, perceiving him to be awake, came from the fire. "Well, Henry, old man, how do you feel this morning?" he demanded. The youth yawned again. Then he puckered his mouth to a little pucker. His head, in truth, felt precisely like a melon, and there was an unpleasant sensation at his stomach. "Oh, Lord, I feel pretty bad," he said. "Thunder!" exclaimed the other. I'd hoped you'd feel all right this morning. Let's see the bandage. I guess it slipped." He began to tinker at the wound in rather a clumsy way until the youth exploded. "Gosh darn it," he said in a sharp irritation. "You're the hangedest man I ever saw. You wear muffs on your hands. Why in good thunderation can't you be more easy? I'd rather you stand afar off and throw guns at it. Now go slow and don't act as if you're nailing down carpet." He glared with insolent command at his friend, but the latter answered soothingly. Well, we'll come now and get some grub, he said. Then maybe you'll feel better. At the fireside, the loud young soldier watched over his comrades' wants with tenderness and care. He was very busy marshalling the little black vagabonds of tin cups and pouring into them the streaming iron-colored mixture from a small and sooty tin pail. He had some fresh meat, which he roasted hurriedly upon a stick. He sat down then and contemplated the youth's appetite with glee. The youth took note of a remarkable change in his comrade since those days of camp life upon the river bank. He seemed no more to be continually regarding the proportions of his personal prowess. He was not furious at small words that pricked his conceits. He was no more a loud young soldier. There was about him now a fine reliance. He showed a quiet belief in his purposes and his abilities, and this inward confidence evidently enabled him to be indifferent to little words of other men aimed at him. The youth reflected. He had been used to regarding his comrade as a blatant child, with an audacity grown from his inexperience, thoughtless, headstrong, jealous, and filled with a tinsel courage. A swaggering babe, unaccustomed to strut in his own dooryard. The youth wondered where he had borne these new eyes, when his comrade had made the great discovery that there were many men who would refuse to be subjected by him. Apparently, the other had now climbed a peak of wisdom from which he could perceive himself as a very wee thing, and the youth saw that ever after it would be easier to live in his friend's neighborhood. His comrade balanced his ebony coffee cup on his knee. Well, Henry, he said, what you think about the chances now? Do you think we'll wallop him? The youth considered for a moment. Day before yesterday, he finally replied with boldness, you would have bet you licked the whole kit and caboodle all by yourself. His friend looked a trifle amazed. Would I? He asked. He pondered. Well, perhaps I would, he decided at last. He stared humbly at the fire. The youth was quite disconcerted at his surprising reception of his remarks. Oh, no, you wouldn't either, he said, hastily trying to retrace. But the other made a depreciating gesture. Oh, you needn't mind, Henry, he said. I believe I was a pretty big fool in those days. He spoke so after a lapse of years. There was a little pause. All the officers say we've got the Rebs in a pretty tight box, said the friend, clearing his throat in a commonplace way. They all seem to think that we got him just where we want him. I don't know about that, the youth replied. What I seen over the other right side makes me think it was the other way around. From where I was, it looked as if we was getting a good pounding yesterday. Do you think so? Inquired the friend. I thought we handled him pretty rough yesterday. Not a bit, said the youth. Why, Lord, man, you didn't see nothing of the fight. Why, then a sudden thought came to him. Oh, Jim Conklin's dead. His friend started. What? Is he? Jim Conklin? The youth spoke slowly. Yes, he's dead, shot in the side. You don't say. Jim Conklin. Poor cuss. All about them were other small fires surrounded by men with their little black utensils. From one of these near came sudden sharp voices in a row. It appeared that two light-footed soldiers had been teasing a huge bearded man, causing him to spill coffee upon his blue knees. The man had gone into a rage and had sworn comprehensively. Stung by his language, his tormentors had immediately bristled at him with the great show of resenting unjust oaths. Possibly there was going to be a fight. The friend arose and went over to them, making pacific motions with his arms. Oh, here now, boys, what's the use, he said.